There is a particular kind of darkness that settles over the lakes of northern Indiana in the deep hours of summer. It is not the darkness of winter, sharp and cold and final. It is something softer, warmer, more deceptive. The kind of darkness that wraps itself around you like a blanket and whispers that you are safe, that nothing bad could possibly happen in a place this peaceful. Trees stand tall around the water, and the cicadas hum their ancient songs, and the stars burn overhead in their slow procession across the sky. And on a warm August night in 1975, in the small town of North Webster, Indiana, that darkness swallowed a 17-year-old girl whole. Her name was Laurel Jean Mitchell, and by morning, the waters of the Elkhart River would hold her body like a secret that no one could decipher for nearly 50 years. North Webster sits in Kosciusko County, in the lake country of northern Indiana. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the summers stretch long and lazy, and the children grow up swimming in the lakes and riding bicycles down quiet roads that wind through cornfields and past white clapboard churches. In 1923, 100 acres of land on the north shore of Lake Webster were purchased for $25,000 and given a name that spoke of aspiration and faith: Epworth Forest. It became a Methodist church camp, one of the largest and most respected in American Methodism. An 1,800-seat auditorium rose from the Indiana soil in 1924, and for decades, the faithful gathered there each summer to worship, to fellowship, to send their children into the care of the church and the gentle rhythms of camp life. By the summer of 1975, Epworth Forest had expanded to over 240 acres. It was a sprawling campus of meeting halls and dormitories, pathways winding through towering hardwoods, and at its heart, the shimmering expanse of Lake Webster. Laurel Jean Mitchell worked there that summer, serving food and drinks at the camp snack bar. She was 17 years old. She lived with her family in North Webster, and to all who knew her, she was a bright and gentle presence in that small community. Her younger sister Sarah was just 12, looking up to Laurel the way younger sisters do, with a mixture of admiration and the quiet certainty that their older sibling would always be there. On the evening of Wednesday, August 6th, 1975, Laurel finished her shift at the Epworth Forest snack bar around 10 o'clock at night. The summer air was warm and heavy, the kind of evening when the world seems to slow down and breathe. She had plans that night. Simple plans, the kind that 17-year-olds make in small towns during long summer evenings. She was going to walk about half a mile from the camp to meet her friends at Adventureland, a small amusement park on the north side of North Webster. It was a walk she had likely made many times before, along familiar roads, past familiar houses, under the same Indiana sky she had known her entire life. Laurel Jean Mitchell never arrived at Adventureland. She never met her friends that night. The walk should have taken no more than 10 or 15 minutes. A straight shot along a quiet road, past the occasional porch light, past the familiar shapes of houses she had known since childhood. At that hour, the road would have been mostly empty. The camp was winding down for the evening. The amusement park's lights would have been visible in the distance, a warm glow above the tree line, promising cotton candy and laughter and all the small, innocent pleasures of a summer night. But somewhere along that half-mile stretch of road, in the warm darkness of that August evening, something happened, something terrible. A car, perhaps, headlights approaching from behind, a voice calling out. We will never know exactly how it began, only how it ended. What we know is that Laurel Jean Mitchell vanished from the face of the earth between 2 points separated by half a mile of Indiana road. When she did not come home, her parents did what any parents would do. They called the police. They reported their daughter missing. And then they waited in the particular agony that only parents of missing children understand, hoping that there was some innocent explanation, that she had stayed with a friend, that she had simply lost track of time, that she had fallen asleep somewhere and would come walking through the door any minute with an apologetic smile. The hours passed, and the telephone did not ring, and their daughter did not walk through the front door. The darkness outside their windows deepened, and with it, their dread. The next morning, Thursday, August 7th, at approximately 10:30 in the morning, two fishermen made a discovery that would haunt the community of North Webster for decades to come. At the Mallard Roost Public Access Site on County Road 600 North in western Noble County, they found the body of a young woman in the south branch of the Elkhart River. It was Laurel Jean Mitchell. She was 17 miles northeast of North Webster, 17 miles from the church camp where she had served her last cup of coffee, 17 miles from the road where she had taken her last free steps. The autopsy told a story that was as heartbreaking as it was horrifying. Laurel Jean Mitchell had drowned, but this was no accident. The medical examiner found clear evidence of a violent struggle. Marks on her body spoke of resistance, of a young woman who had refused to go quietly into that dark water. She had fought for her life with everything she had. Every ounce of strength in her 17-year-old body had been marshaled against her attackers, but in the end, the water had taken her. Her death was ruled a homicide, and the investigation began in earnest. The community of North Webster was shaken to its core. This was not a place where such things happened. This was a town of church suppers and Friday night football games, where doors were left unlocked and children roamed freely through the long summer days. The idea that someone could snatch a girl from a road within walking distance of a church camp and drown her in a river 17 miles away was almost impossible to comprehend. And yet, that is exactly what had happened. The question that consumed investigators was a simple one, but its answer proved maddeningly elusive. How did a 17-year-old girl walking a half mile to an amusement park end up dead in a river 17 miles away? Someone had taken her. Someone had put her in a vehicle and driven her through the darkness of the Indiana countryside, past sleeping farms and silent crossroads, to a remote boat launch on the Elkhart River. And there, they had killed her. Detectives canvassed the area. They interviewed friends, family members, co-workers at the camp, anyone who might have seen something, heard something, known something. But the leads dried up, one by one, like puddles in the August heat. In 1975, there was no DNA analysis. There were no surveillance cameras on every corner. There were no cell phones pinging off towers, no digital breadcrumbs to follow. There was only the testimony of human beings, and in this case, the humans who knew what had happened were not talking. The case went cold. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. The seasons changed, and the leaves fell from the trees around Lake Webster, and the snow covered the ground where Laurel had once walked, and the spring came again, and the camp opened its doors for another summer. And still, there were no answers. The file sat in a drawer somewhere, gathering dust while the world moved on. Presidents came and went. Technology transformed daily life beyond recognition. The Berlin Wall fell, the internet was born, and through all of it, the question remained. Who killed Laurel Jean Mitchell? Her family did not move on. They could not. Sarah, her younger sister, grew up carrying the weight of her sister's unsolved murder like a stone around her neck. Every milestone in Sarah's life was shadowed by the milestones Laurel would never reach. Every birthday, every graduation, every wedding and holiday was marked by the absence of the older sister who should have been there. The people of North Webster remembered too, in their own way. In a town that small, a wound that deep does not heal. It simply scabs over, and beneath the surface, the pain continues to pulse with every heartbeat of the community. And somewhere in the towns and counties of northern Indiana, two men walked free. They lived their lives. They went to work. They ate dinner. They slept in their beds at night, knowing what they had done on that warm August evening in 1975. And over the years, the knowledge of their crime did what secrets so often do. Festered, demanded to be spoken. In 2013, nearly 4 decades after Laurel's death, a woman in Florida came forward with a disturbing story. She had gone on a date with a man named John Wayne Lehman. And during that date, Lehman had made a confession. He told her that he had been involved in a crime he had committed with his friend, a man named Fred Bandy. But Lehman did not simply admit to involvement. He shared details, specific details about the case, including anatomical findings from Mitchell's autopsy, details that only someone with intimate knowledge of the crime would know. The following year, in 2014, another witness emerged. A man who had known Fred Bandy Jr. in high school went to the police and told them that Bandy had admitted to the killing. He even knew the specific location where Mitchell's body had been found. These were not vague rumors. These were direct admissions made by the suspects themselves to people in their lives. The killers had been bragging about what they had done. Then, on September 25th, 2019, the Noble County Sheriff's Department received yet another report. A witness told investigators that years earlier, at a high school party, Bandy had openly stated that he and Lehman had committed the murder of Laurel Jean Mitchell together. 3 separate witnesses, 3 separate confessions. And yet, in the absence of physical evidence, the wheels of justice turned slowly. But 2019 brought something else as well. Something that would change everything. In that year, investigators made the decision to resubmit Mitchell's clothing to the Indiana State Police Laboratory Division for examination and DNA testing. Nearly half a century of advances in forensic science had transformed what was possible. Evidence that had been silent in 1975 could now speak volumes. The laboratory work took time, patience, precision. The scientists at the Indiana State Police Lab understood the gravity of what they were doing. This was not just another forensic analysis. This was the last best hope for a family that had waited nearly half a century for answers. Every step of the process was carried out with meticulous care, every result double-checked, every protocol followed to the letter. And in late 2022, investigators obtained a DNA sample from Fred Bandy Jr. He provided it voluntarily. Perhaps he believed that after 47 years, whatever trace evidence might have existed would have long since degraded beyond any useful analysis. Perhaps he was simply overconfident, the way men who have escaped justice for decades sometimes are, lulled into a false sense of security by the passage of so many years. Whatever his reasoning, the decision would prove to be his undoing. The results were staggering. The DNA analysis determined that Fred Bandy Jr. was 13 billion times more likely to be the contributor of the DNA found on Laurel Jean Mitchell's clothing than any other unknown person. 13 billion. It is a number so large that it effectively eliminates any possibility of coincidence. The science had caught up with the crime, and the evidence was unambiguous. February 6th, 2023, 47 years and 6 months after Laurel Jean Mitchell was pulled from the waters of the Elkhart River, Indiana State Police and the Noble County Sheriff's Department placed Fred Bandy Jr., age 67, of Goshen, Indiana, and John Wayne Lehman, age 67, of Auburn, Indiana, under arrest. Bandy was charged with first-degree murder. Lehman was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. The theory of the crime, as laid out by prosecutors, was chilling in its simplicity. On the night of August 6, 1975, Bandy and Lehman had grabbed Laurel Jean Mitchell as she walked along the road near the church camp. They had forced her into Bandy's 1971 Oldsmobile, and then they had driven her 17 miles through the Indiana night to the Mallard Roost Public Access Site on County Road 600 North. There, at the edge of the Elkhart River, they had drowned her. The arrest of Fred Bandy Jr. also cast a disturbing light on the decades that had passed since Laurel's murder. Bandy's criminal record revealed a pattern that was as sickening as it was relevant. In 2001, he had been convicted in Noble County of 2 counts of child solicitation and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. In 2016, he was charged with child molestation in 2 separate cases involving children under the age of 14. He pleaded guilty and served 5 years and 11 months in prison. He was a registered sex offender. For decades, while the case of Laurel Jean Mitchell gathered dust, one of her killers had continued to prey upon the vulnerable. The legal proceedings moved forward. John Wayne Lehman reached a plea agreement with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. Fred Bandy Jr. did not plead guilty. He elected to go to trial. On October 7th, 2024, nearly 49 years after the crime, the case of the state of Indiana versus Fred Bandy Jr. was heard in a one-day bench trial before Noble Circuit Court Judge Michael Kramer. There was no jury. The judge alone would weigh the evidence and render a verdict. The prosecution presented the DNA evidence, the witness testimony, the pattern of confessions and admissions that stretched back decades. They painted a picture of 2 young men who had committed an act of unimaginable cruelty on a summer night in 1975, and then spent the rest of their lives alternately hiding from and boasting about what they had done. The defense argued what it could, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. The DNA alone was devastating, and when combined with the testimony of multiple witnesses who had heard the defendants confess, the outcome was all but certain. On October 8th, 2024, Judge Kramer delivered his verdict: guilty. Fred Bandy Jr. was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Laurel Jean Mitchell. In the courtroom, the word hung in the air like the toll of a bell: guilty. After 49 years, the word that Laurel's family had prayed to hear. Sentencing came swiftly. John Wayne Lehman received 8 years in prison for his role in the conspiracy. It was a sentence that struck many as inadequate, given the severity of the crime. Sarah Mitchell Knisley, Laurel's sister, who had been just 12 years old when her world was shattered, told reporters that she did not believe 8 years was enough. How do you measure the value of a stolen life in years? How many years behind bars equals justice for a 17-year-old girl who was dragged from a quiet road and drowned in a river? Fred Bandy Jr. received a different sentence. On October 22, 2024, a Noble County judge sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole. At 69 years old, it is a sentence that will very likely keep him behind bars for the remainder of his natural life. After the verdict, Sarah Mitchell Knisley spoke to reporters. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of nearly 5 decades of grief, of waiting, of wondering if this day would ever come. She said, "It was awesome to hear. It was a sigh of relief. It is over." But is it ever truly over? Can any verdict, any sentence, any number of years behind bars truly compensate for what was taken on that August night in 1975? Laurel Jean Mitchell was 17 years old. She worked at a church camp snack bar. She had friends she was going to meet at an amusement park. She had a little sister who adored her. She had parents who loved her and a community that cherished her. She had a life ahead of her that stretched out in all directions, full of possibility and promise. She might have gone to college. She might have married, had children of her own, grown old watching the sunsets over the lake where she spent her summers. She might have done 1,000 things, lived 1,000 moments, touched 1,000 lives. And on a warm August night, 2 men decided that none of that mattered. They took her from a road near a church camp, and they drove her into the darkness, and they held her beneath the waters of the Elkhart River until the struggling stopped. The lakes of northern Indiana are still beautiful in the summer. The cicadas still sing their ancient songs. The stars still burn overhead in their slow procession across the sky, and the waters of the Elkhart River still flow as they have for thousands of years, carrying with them the memory of everything they have witnessed. For nearly 50 years, those waters kept a secret. But the truth, like water, finds its way through every crack, around every barrier, past every obstacle. It may take days, it may take decades, but it comes, it always comes. And in the end, it came for Fred Bandy Jr. and John Wayne Lehman. It came in the form of a DNA sample and the testimony of those who could no longer stay silent. It came in the form of a judge's gavel and a verdict of guilty. And for Laurel Jean Mitchell, whose bright and gentle presence was stolen from this world on a summer night in 1975, it came in the form of 2 words spoken by her sister. Nearly 50 years later, it is over.